On everybody. All right, let me get let's get a few things going here. All right. Well, I'm assuming as most people that subscribe to me saw, I went salmon fishing today. Let's jump right into it. People will join. We'll talk for a little while. Um, yeah. So, Paul and I normally fish together on Mondays. You've seen us. We go all over the place, and we got an invite from an old friend of ours who you will recognize. Everybody out there on the Awakening Angler channel land. How you doing, Don Terry? Chris Bryan. Um, Steve Smith won back when I hit 4,000 subscribers. We had the contest, and Paul and I took him on a Monday, and we went up and we went trolling this past spring for browns up on Lake Ontario. Steve from out the Albany way. He I don't know what he does there. I'm pretty sure he's the boss of a big Harley Davidson dealership. Um, Great guy. Text me the other day. I see his pictures. He's up here almost every weekend. He bouncing around between Oneida and Lake Ontario. He's got his boat set up for trolling with Scotty downriggers on it, and it's tricked right out, man. It was nice. And he invited Paul and I to come out and go salmon fishing with him this morning. And we both couldn't have said yes fast enough. And so we all met up there this morning at 4:45. And we dropped the boat in the water and we slipped out and we went out of Oswego. You didn't have to go far. We ran west, past the college, past Rudy's, because that's where he had got him the day before. He'd been up here since Saturday, I think. And he got him there yesterday. And so we went back to where he was, and we weren't 20 minutes before we had our first one. We set gear. We had two downriggers fishing with meat rigs on it. And then we had two wire dipsy divers on either side. Great setup. Fish aren't super deep. You can easily reach them with a wire dipsy. Certainly obviously with your downriggers too. I think you could have been by the afternoon, that offshore wind and that temperature getting sucked in and pulled up, and he didn't have a Fishhawk speed and temperature probe on the boat. But you could just see the marks all day, and we had pretty solid marks, some by themselves, and we did mark a bunch of bait, and every bait pot had fish on it. Matter of fact, a couple times whoever was driving said, "Oh, there's a big school of bait," and it wasn't, 2 minutes later, not even as you troll past it with your gear, that one of the rods would fire. Bill Gilbert, right on. Yeah, so that's what we did today. And like I say, Steve was gracious to reach out, and he had nobody to fish with today, and we jumped at the chance and ran up there. I love Lake Ontario. I never know who knows me or knows anything about my story, my journey through the fishing world. But when I came home from the Army in '94, I was 23, and I moved up to Pulaski. I got home. I didn't have anything to do or go. And the idea of going as a grown man, going back to my mother's house was not appealing. So I went out, and lo and behold, I met a guy that was looking for somebody to live in a fishing lodge in Pulaski. And and run the place during salmon season. And he's like, you can live there the whole year. He goes, but when it's busy with fishermen, you got to be the one that checks them in and out and make sure that the maid cleans the rooms and all that stuff. I was like the manager or whatever, but I got to live there for free. And the rest is history. Um, Honestly, I started fishing the Salmon River every day that fall, learning everything I could and absorbing it and soaking it all in. Um, Within a year, I started guiding and running a drift boat on the river. Um, it was a natural fit for me. It was incredible, So that was the start of it for me. But I've been on the lake since I was in my young teens, 13, 14, when my grandpa and I used to go with my Uncle Phil and my cousin Daryl or Chris. And we were trolling. My uncle had an old 21-foot MFG tri-hull with two hand crank downriggers on it that we used to go out and troll for, troll for kings. So I've been around this lake and this fishery for me all my life, since I was just a kid. And every time I go up there, now that I'm not up there all the time, I feel that same pull, that same feeling, that seeing the downrigger rod fire, or seeing that wire dipsy just and you hear that sound, or you hear drag, and I don't mean like click, click, click. I mean, most people in their fishing career never really hear the drag on their reel going out like that. And it makes them feel helpless and nervous all at the same time, like it's going to immediately get away or it's going to take all the line off your reel. If any of my friends in the business are watching, you're all shaking your head with me, or in the middle of a big run, you have somebody take their thumb and they put it right on the reel like that because they want it to stop and they think they can just make it stop and then just crank it in. That's not what it's like up there. You can manhandle a walleye in 20 foot of water and get it up to the surface, lickety split. And sometimes they don't put up a fight anyway. And you can whack, scoop it, and it's in the boat. Boom, just like that. You're not doing that with a salmon. You're not doing that with a half dead salmon, let alone one that is dime, silver, bright, as healthy at the apex of its absolute existence right now. And man, do these fish give an account for themselves. Like, my arm's sore and I only fought 3 fish today. And none of which were really big jumbo adults. We didn't have anything. All 3 of us, I thought, did great on the rods today. We didn't, we lost a few fish, but not because of angler error. Stuff gets tangled in it. That's part of trolling with multiple rigs. And you break off on something, that's one thing. But it's not like you were, we fought fish very well today. But nothing we fought today really took that blistering king run that they'll go 400, 500, 600 feet just like that, And so when I get back up there and get to do that again, it really reignites how much I love it and how much a part of it that is of me. My fishing resume as a whole, as a person. I was telling those guys today, I can't think of how many countless days and hours I've spent on that lake trolling professionally. I've been a part of, I don't even know, thousands and thousands of people's fishing trips. I'm sure there are pictures of me with people smiling and holding fish all over the place. As with anybody that's done it for this long, you think about all those things, and then this morning that first rod goes and my buddy Paul, that's the first salmon he's caught trolling on the lake. Um, and I say it in the video today. You can see that smile on his face. Um, I have been a part of so many people's personal best of a species, especially in any of the salmon, trout, and salmonid species. Um, and I said it to him today, like, look at that smile. That smile of doing something, of being somewhere, of accomplishing something, of getting a big one, of sharing a moment with someone or wherever you are, or absorbing it. It's amazing. And that lake, that lake brings all that together because every single fish, every single time that rod goes, that bite happens, it could be the bite that changes your fishing life. It could be a world record, an all tackle world record. Cohos, uh, especially cohos. Matter of fact, the all tackle world record, I believe, still exists, unless that's changed in the last couple of years. The all tackle world record for silver salmon, coho salmon, is out of Eastern Lake Ontario. Matter of fact, the day after it was caught, myself and Captain Todd Shelter on Strike Zone 2, the old sea tractor, um, we caught a coho that was only about 2.5 pounds shy of that new all tackle world record. We didn't break 30 with it, but we took it to certified scales. It was 29 and change. Um, I remember when Captain Jerry Berzadola on the Dixie Dandy broke the New York State um, brown trout record. I was fishing with Captain Donnie Rufo on the back of his boat, and I could see Jerry, and you could hear the guys screaming and yelling. And it was 15 minutes before Captain came on and said, "We're on our way in to get this officially weighed because we think we have the biggest brown trout ever." He was in sight of us. Um, so that kind of you then add that on top of everything else that's so amazing. The sunrise and the sunsets on Lake Ontario are breathtaking and some of the most photographed in all of the North America, especially the sunsets, and especially from the eastern shore looking west as that sun sets. They're breathtaking. So let's start right there. You can start and you can begin and end the day with that kind of beauty. Um, the water up there nowadays, different than when I was a kid. Um, the water nowadays has a look that I've never seen in another body of water. It is a steely blue, slate colored liquid that almost looks gelatinous, like you could scoop a handful up like this and it would just sit in your hand. Um, it has depth, and the color is just like when you're, well, again, it's one of those things. I've sat as we were running back in, and I, whoever was, the captain's driving, and I would be sitting in the back, usually looking out the back of the boat as we're going this way, and I have watched the wake as we drive away, and I've seen it thousands of times, and I always look at it the same because it's like you can see down in it, and the water is like no other. I love to swim in it. I love to swim in that lake. It feels like you feel better when you get out of it. Like you somehow feel cleaner all the way through. So there's that. Then there's the outstanding fishing. It really can be a numbers game most days when you find those fish, and the guys that do it every day are professionals at it, and they stay on those schools of fish. Um, and they know their craft. They know their craft. If they're running boats out there, they got to have something on the ball. And the guys that have been around for a long time are absolute masters. Um, so now you have beautiful scenery and incredible water and awesome fishing, and now you sprinkle on that constant thought of the next one could be the biggest of my life ever, of a species. There are so many monsters in the Great Lakes that you're only one rod, one fish away from it being you. And that you can't put into different things. That is something like the opportunity would exist, but the chances would be astronomical that I could walk out, or go out into Oneida Lake and catch the new state record walleye, which would be like 18 pounds or something like that, high teens. Yeah, physically it is possible, but the chance of that happening is slim and none. Now, the chance of that happening, statistically speaking, as a percentage wise, is exponentially higher in Lake Ontario for that scenario to happen. And it's really something that people expect. It wouldn't surprise anybody. Out here, it would shock the world. Nobody really is that like, oh my God, I can't believe that guy just broke the new state record largemouth in Cayuga Lake. So now Cayuga Lake in New York State holds the record for smallmouth and largemouth. And the same guy caught the same smallmouth 2 years in a row. But still he did. So that lake holds, but Cayuga's not huge surface area, but it is huge in volume of water. I don't know, 10 times what Oneida is, and Oneida dwarfs it in surface area, but Oneida is not very deep. Cayuga's thin and super deep. There's a large volume of water, which then tends to grow larger fish. And Ontario is the largest we got around, and it holds things that you don't know or you could never anticipate. And that adds that additional layer of the lock derbies going on right now. So that adds that extra layer of intensity. And Steve did tell me yesterday, and I completely spaced on it until this morning, that, oh, by the way, the lock derby is going on and he's in it, but Paul and I would have had to have been in it. And I didn't even think about it until I got there this morning, and I went, shit, I forgot about it. The story of coulda, woulda, shoulda. If you talk to 20 different charter captains right now, if you knew them and you called them up and said, hey, in all the lock derbies you've ever been a part of, how many times have you had customers catch what would have been a winning or placing fish and they weren't in the derby? And I would bet you every one of those 20 captains would say it's happened at least once to me. Every time a rod went off this morning, I kind of in the back of my head said, God, I hope it's not a giant, because we would have been beside ourselves, would have been my fault. Totally. So, but those are those kind of things like, and then that lock derby goes on for however long. And that's another great way to generate some of that excitement, and because now you've got skin in the game to really focus every time you're fighting a fish. If you're a customer, or you're just out as a private individual, like we all were today, having fun. Now all of a sudden, every fish you really feel, if you were in that, and you're like, oh, okay, I'm going to really pay attention now. So it's so wonderful to get back up there, and then the fishing. I've only went salmon fishing twice this year. I went once in April the week before Walleye Fest with my buddy Bill Morey, and we smashed him, took a 2-man limit in about 2.5 hours. Today we smashed him. We took a 3-man limit in 3 hours. So those are pretty great odds. And both days it was pretty epic salmon fishing. So anyway, I'm going to go through and read a few things and listen. Let's talk. I mean, I like telling stories about that stuff. I've been thinking about the big lake all day. If you guys have any questions for me about that kind of stuff, like I say, I've been doing it since I was 23 years old. Good God, I'm 53 now. Is that right? Next year will be 30 years for me. I started in 95. I got home in 94. I started working on the lake in 95. So next year will be 30 years I've been doing it. Um, and I love it. And it's funny. A lot of times people go, trolling. Yeah, trolling. Now I want to go out there here sometime in between now and they go in the river. I do want to go out on these fresh, active feeding fish, and I want to spot lock and I want to set the live scope up, and I want to see if I can cast a swim bait to one or vertical jig one with like a saltwater big speed jig. I do want to see if I can do that, and I want to try that. But yeah, trolling, because that's how you do it, and that's how you cover water, and that's how you make the most efficient way of presenting lures to feeding fish that are not sitting in an area or relating to structure. The only structure they have is these undulating schools of bait, and they follow around. So yeah, trolling. But again, I find it hard to believe I've never, in all of the thousands and thousands of people I've taken fishing, I've never watched someone be unhappy or while reeling in a fish. And so at that point, so to speak, what's it matter how you get the fish on? Now fight it. Do your thing. Go mano a mano with these things. And we fish heavy gear. We're not fishing light stuff. These things are big and strong and sporty as you can imagine. They have terrible attitudes. I think it stems from I don't know what it stems from. There was a joke there somewhere, but from there, yeah. But they have terrible attitudes, especially when they get close to the boat. Especially when they get close to the boat. You feel like you just got beat up in like trying to ride a bull when all of a sudden you get beat up at the back of the boat, trying to get a big gnarly 20+ pound king in the net, stuff all over the place. It's not like it's wide open. You got riggers and you've got lines, and there's always stuff when you're trolling. We proved that today in a small boat with 3 guys and only 6 rods. Let's see who's here. Don Terry, Chris Bryan. What's up, Wiz? Good evening. Big drum roll. Bob Bender, Bill Gilbert, Thad Lance, Bill Moore. Just talking about you. Chris Bryan says, cool story, Matt. I didn't know that's how it all began. Yeah, it began at that's exactly how it began. I was getting out of the military, out of the Army, and my grandmother passed away unexpectedly one night. And I turned around and moved home to be with my grand. And the rest is history. Yeah. Been a long and winding road from those days. Fishing wise, life wise, I've come full circle in the fishing industry like twice. I swear to God. It has been my life. It is my life. It is, Courtney said something to me the other day. It is so much a part of me that it's you would be hard pressed to take it out of me. Although, another thing that you may not know, when I finally hung it up, when I sold my charter boat, my drift boat, I'd had enough. I didn't want to fish anymore. I didn't want to deal with people anymore. I'd had enough. I didn't fish at all for myself, with myself at all for over 10 years. That's how upset I was with Well, I thought I was upset with fishing. I'm sure I wasn't. It was a combination of things, but I just, it was something I had loved so much. And that old saying is true. When you do something you love for a living, it changes it. It doesn't have to be bad, but if you don't keep it in check, it can get very bad, to the point where I got a divorce from fishing. I was done. I didn't want to talk about it, see it, hear it, nothing. Um, but I guess ultimately I had to come back because it had nothing to do with fishing. It was me and my immaturity and where I was or wasn't in life. Um, and the people and the places and the things I've done because of fishing and with fishing and for fishing could never could never be replaced. Uh, the memories made, and today was another one of those days. Today was today was a lot of fun. You can see it's got everything all stirred back up. Michael Hoover, you guys are talking about drum. Man, I've had a couple fun days out there with a Ned rig, finesse jigging what I was hoping were walleyes and smallmouth all over these rocks, only to have thumping, crushing bites and hook sets in fights from big sheepies, from big freshwater drum, um, that like that Ned rig. Tammy Hoover. Troy, great memories. Thank you. Chris Bryan, I see that about Lake Ontario all the time. Any day you could catch a record in so many different species. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Huh, thanks. He says, Chris says, fishing is a good life. Glad it landed you here. I am too. I couldn't be more happy to share this stuff with people that want it. I mean, I love nothing more. I hear from people a lot. Oh man, I've learned a lot from you. I've watched your videos. You've helped me do this or do that. I'm all about the teaching. I'm all about the teaching, and that has nothing to do with how you come at it. It's just I enjoy sharing what insights I've had, um, along the way. And you do anything long enough, you have those insights. That's everybody. I was just kind of rambling tonight. Um, like I say, I was talking about something today that I enjoyed, and it was fun. But listen, if you have technical questions, if you've never been, if you want, there's there's a number of good people I could recommend. Um, if you're looking for a charter, it's a little late in the season, but there's always time. There's always somebody that's got an opening. Um, or if you got your own boat, listen, I mean, yes, Steve's boat was tricked out as far as having power riggers on it. That was huge. Other than that, it was just rod holders to put the wire dipsy rods in. So, I mean, there are definitely specialized tackle and equipment that you need to be successful on the Great Lakes, especially now when it's an offshore fishery. Um, Anybody can troll the shorelines, um, in the fall or in the spring when it's just flat line trolling, really, or very shallow with lighter line, because you can just put a lure out. You can put it behind a spinning rod if you wanted to. When you get offshore like you are now for these fish, it requires some other things that you don't have to have. Like right now, when those fish are from 100 up, you don't have to have a downrigger to get to them. You can easily get to them with a dipsy diver. And if you don't have a wire dipsy diver, you probably could come close with heavy braid, on like a Chinook diver, which is an all metal body diver and they get a little deeper, you could hit 100 feet with that. Um, so right there alone, you don't absolutely have to have downriggers. You could go out and troll a couple braided line dipsy setups. You could do that. So there's an option. You know, if you say, geez, I'd love to go up and try it, but I don't have all the stuff. You don't have to have a ton of stuff. You have to have some stuff, and you have to understand what that stuff is used for. You got to get to where the fish are. You got to get whatever you're going to put by them, a spoon, a fly, a piece of cut bait. You got to get it down to where they are. And if they're in the water column here, you got to get it close to them, but above them. It doesn't do you any good to fish below them because they don't look down. They only look up, and they're going to look up and see that going by or coming to them. So you got to get it to where they are, and then your electronics tell you that. We saw a steady stream of marks today in a general area, which was, say, 80 to 100. As the morning went on, that was maybe 70 to 90. It was raising up a little bit, but most all those marks, a few you'd see below that, which it's cold water. They can be in there all the time, anytime. But you got to be able to get whatever you want to them. How much? Within 10 feet, I would think would be ideal if you could get it that close. 20 feet, maybe it's plenty clear down there. I don't know if you can draw them from that far away. I'm sure. I have no way of knowing that. So I really encourage anybody who has never done it to give it a shot, because it's a blast. I don't want to just ramble, guys. If anybody's got any questions, if anyone wants to talk about salmon fishing up on the Great Lakes right now, we're not talking about tributary yet or river fishing, but what about out on the lake right now? Antsy. That's all right. That's all right. We can wrap it up. I have talked to Captain Tony Bufa. I've got to get down. Hopefully him and I are going to get a chance to fish together here shortly. And I may have him do a live with me. He said he would. We could do it together. And I wanted to talk about trolling right now in the summer on Oneida. But also, I've got a couple other guys out there that I'd like to put a call out to this week. And so maybe we'll do a little bit of a summer trolling seminar, virtually like this on one of the lives coming up. I've been kicking that around for a couple weeks, so maybe we'll do that next week. Bill Morris, he just has a question. How far offshore does a thermocline usually set up this time of year? For those of you that may not know, the thermocline is basically, there's Lake Ontario, we'll talk about specifically, is, even though it's a giant lake, it has subsurface currents, very similar to river currents, and can be as strong and as widespread as a river. It's wind generated typically, and the thing to remember about it is what goes this way will come back this way. So for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. And so if the wind blows hard this way, that means it's pushing all that surface water to one side, and it goes like this, and it starts to fill up, and it pushes that cold water farther out and farther down in an area. Now, if you're on the other side of where that wind is, then your warm water on the surface gets pushed away from you, and it fills back up from underneath with cold water. And so those two layers don't mix. There is what you call a thermocline in between them. Now, that warm upper layer could be 60 plus degrees 55-ish plus degrees all the way up to the surface. But then below that, it goes from say 55 to the low 40s. That's kind of their sweet spot. That's the water temperature range that they excel in. They can go above or below that, but that's what they prefer. And below that is what we call ice water, in the 30s. And lake trout live in that their whole life. Anything over probably, anything over probably 180, 200 feet, I would think doesn't really cycle through with water temp. I don't think you're ever going to get warm water pinned to the bottom at that depth, but so there are things that live down there and can live down there their whole life. So where those two rub, that thermocline is where a lot of times you'll see a lot of your bait fish and then your predator fish. So that thermocline goes up and down, meaning depth-wise, depending on which way the wind is blowing and where you are in relation to that wind. Today, we were on the south shore, right off Oswego, and the wind was blowing. It was a south wind blowing offshore. So again, and now we were only a mile and a half, not 2 miles offshore. So it's pushing that warm water out to the north, out to sea, let's say, and that cold water is coming back because it's going that way and then coming back underneath it. And as the day went on, now the only thing that slowed it down was that the wind was diminishing as the day went on. If it would have stayed the speed it was this morning, you could have had temperature all the way into 45, 50 feet because it would have sucked it right into that shoreline. So it does depend on some things. Even without a temperature probe, a lot of times you can see it if you turn the sensitivity up on your electronics, on your fish finder screen, because it will read that difference in water density. That cold water is denser molecularly than the warm water. And sometimes if you turn your gain up far enough, you'll get a reverb off your sonar echo, and you can tell where the thermocline is. If not, there's other ways to do it, but that's one of them. And some of the old captains that I grew up with and fished for would tell you that you would want to go find where temperature met bottom. So, high 40, low 50 degree water, where's it meet bottom? That's where those fish are going to be. Again, I believe today we could have went inside of everybody. I didn't see anybody inside 100 feet, really even inside 130 feet, where we were. Now, they were catching them out there. Don't get me wrong. They didn't have to go in there, but I didn't see anybody in there looking either, which surprised me because I thought for sure, and we didn't really look either. But so that was a really long way. At least I explained it, because a lot of people hear that term thermocline, but don't understand necessarily what it means or what it means in relation to the fishing, because you do want to find temperature. That's when you hear people say that all the time. That's what it means. You're looking for their optimal temperature range within the water column, because that's where they're going to be, which means that's where you want to put your baits. That's the whole correlation of it coming together. Bill Gilbert, 30 years since I was on Ontario, have a 36-inch, 28-pound king mounted on my wall. That's a dandy, Bill. That is a dandy. Chris says, starting to run into a darker fish once in a while and some big browns. We had a couple fish that had a little tint of darkness to them, but most of them were pretty dime. They were beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. All right. Well, we're at 40 minutes, guys. Why don't we call it, unless anybody's got any more questions? I hope everybody enjoyed it. This is kind of listen, fishing's fishing. We can talk about any fishing. Doesn't have to just be a night of lake. Matter of fact, We talk about that all the time. So I'm glad to talk about anything else. Um, Today was fun and it was good to do some other things. A lot of fun. Um, Steve, thank you again very much. I'm sure you're watching. And I will see you guys tomorrow morning. I will be back on a night of tomorrow morning. I think it's going to be pouring rain, but I'm still going. Thanks, everybody. Keep your tip up.